네, 안녕하십니까. 오늘 장인 초대석 외전으로 왔습니다. 특별편인데요. 오늘은 라이엇 게임즈에 또 왔습니다. 반갑습니다. 오늘은 어떤 장인분들을 모셨냐면요, 바로 롤의 개발자분들을 모셨습니다. 일단 자기소개 부탁드리겠습니다.
So my name is Matthew Long Harrison. I'm the lead game designer on the Summoners Rift team. I've been at Riot for 8 years on this team, and our team does game balance, preseason, basically everything on Summoners Rift except for new champions.
8년 동안.
Well, I've been on the team for 8 years. I've been in the position for 1 year.
And I'm Chris Roberts. I'm the project lead for the Game Loop team. We work on things like champion select, matchmaking, ranked, and the other queue types you can choose from. I've been at Riot for about 5 years, and I've been on this team for the last 6 months.
와, 이게 사실상 롤의 가장 핵심적인 개발자 분들이 와주셨네요. 가장 중요한 파트의 분들. 일단은 그러면은 사실 이제 프리시즌이 됐는데 올해 이제 2023년 방향성이 좀 사실 궁금하거든요.
Yeah, so we had kind of a bunch of different changes we were trying to do for preseason. One of them was to modernize a lot of old systems and content in the game. So things like communication tools have been in their current state for many years, as well as making some updates to old items and bringing some old items back. We also wanted to make some changes to the roles because roles like jungle were very powerful, but they were very unpopular. And so people didn't want to play it, and it was kind of difficult to play because you would get flamed by your teammates as well as being very difficult to get into.
너무 잘 알고 계시네요. 모든 비난의 어떤 화살은 정글로 갔기 때문에 너무 좋은 패치인 것 같습니다, 이것도.
Yeah, so and then the other set of changes we were doing was for top lane. We made a lot of changes during the year, so like the durability update, teleport changes, and the objective changes, and these all negatively impacted top lane because objective changes were easier to get for bot laners to take dragon and things like that. So we wanted to increase the power and popularity of the top lane role as well.
사실 제가 하는 콘텐츠가 한 챔피언의 장인, 마스터들을 모시는 그런 콘텐츠를 하기 때문에 탑라인의 장인분들의 항상 그 아쉬움이 이번 시즌에 탑라인에 영향이 많이 없다 였는데 이거를 또 알고, 그러니까 너무 좋아요. 네, 이런 거를 계속 다 알아주셔가지고 양호하네요.
Yeah, we don't think that the changes have gone all the way, but we're trying to make at least some small changes with the experience changes. So like the mid lane minions will give 1 less gold, and then solo laners get more experience. So we hope to buff top lane, but not affect mid lane balance. And then the other thing for top lane was we changed teleport in 12.1, so top laners couldn't teleport to bot lane. But top laners were generally mixed about the changes. There's some top laners that want to fight their opponent 1v1, and there are some top laners that want to impact the map, you know? So we need to be careful to satisfy both audiences. I think in Western players call it a bot lane fiesta. So, when people kept coming to their lane. So we were trying to make it so that each lane was able to play against their lane opponent more regularly so that they could test their skill against their lane opponent and then have more broad impact later.
제가 라이엇이 너무 좋은 이유가 항상 이렇게 큰 변화, 뭐 크고 작은 변화를 계속해서 줘서 절대 질릴 틈도 없고, 그리고 항상 유저들의 그 니즈를 너무 잘 파악해줘서 감사합니다.
The overall hope with the preseason changes is that we took a bunch of content that was old and we kind of brought it back as new and bring back some things that players really liked before, like Rod of Ages and old items, and bring them back. Yeah.
그러면 일단은 2023년은 약간 이런 어떤 옛날 것을 그리워하는 것들은 좀 복구를 하고, 그리고 이제 시행착오가 있는 것들은 다시 약간 좀 이제 고쳐가면서 다시 고치는 약간 요런 시즌이라고 보면 되겠네요.
Yeah, I would say so. The other focus for during the year is to try and make champions more satisfying to play. During 2022, we did a lot of mid-scope updates to try and take champions that had kind of degraded over time and focus their gameplay output, their gameplay purpose. Yeah.
혹시 2023년에는 리메이크 계획되거나 이런 챔피언들이 있는지 좀 궁금하거든요.
So we have the Aurelion Soul champion rework that's been announced. Outside of that, we're still like planning to do kind of small changes, like like the Swain updates, for example, like small update that the champion kind of felt bad, for lack of a better word, the champion wasn't living up to its fantasy of being like a unkillable bird monster. A lot of champions have kind of degraded over time. Like they're not really living up to their gameplay fantasy, and so we want to do more changes like this. So for example, Nico mini update is trying to help her be more of a trickster, for example, and things like that. Yeah, we're always on the lookout for more champions to kind of have their gameplay fantasy improve. So, if you have any suggestions, we'd love to hear them. Especially champions that feel like over time they've gotten worse and worse. Ari was an example of this. She used to have a very clear identity, but then over time it kind of degraded. She wasn't really good at anything in particular. Yeah, so we're always looking for opportunities like that.
여러분 제가 뭔가 추천할 수는 없을 것 같고요. 댓글로 남겨주세요. 어떤 의견이 있는지, 어떤 정체성에 대해서 제가 여기서 말하기가 조심해야 되거든요. 좋습니다. 그러면은 업데이트나 이런 밸런스적인 거는 다 얘기가 되신 걸까요?
Yeah, my team also has some features that are going into preseason 2023, mostly around champion select, actually. So the first one is pick order swapping. We want players to be able to swap their pick order in champion select at the press of a button instead of the process right now, which can have trouble. Everyone has to type in chat, and then people who want to swap have to have the champion that the other player wants, and that can lead to failure sometimes.
맞아요. 그래서 실제로 이제 여러 가지 에피소드도 많이 일어나고 하는데 너무 좋은 것 같아요, 이거.
The next one we have is champion select anonymity, and this one is already live. This is in ranked solo duo. All the names in champion select are hidden. And the reason we did this mostly is to reduce dodge rates. We've been seeing dodging as a feature become more misused over time, where players are using it to get a competitive advantage to climb. Whereas its intended purpose is to be used in case of some kind of extraordinary event, like something comes up in real life, or you accidentally lock in the wrong champion or something else critical. But not to scout your teammates and then dodge if they're playing something that you don't agree with. Yeah, we know this one can be controversial because people have been doing this for a long time, where they would scout their teammates and use that to make decisions. Monitoring it closely, as the season starts in particular, when people get back to playing ranked like they normally do. Then the last one we have is the Rune Recommender, which we're really excited about. This is to help all players have a more easy time selecting their runes in Champion Select. For new players, the rune system can be one of the most complex things they encounter when they're trying to start League of Legends, and we've made a similar system, which is the item system, a lot easier to access with the item recommendations we have in game. So we wanted to provide something similar to them in Champion Select.
그리고 하나 더 질문이, 그러면 저 통계도 어떤 승률이나 아니면은 픽률이라고 하죠, 유저들이 선호하는 거를 통계를 해서 알고리즘으로 저렇게 추천이 되는 건지, 아니면은 라이엇에서 자체적으로 그냥 고른 것이 나오는 건지, 그게 좀 궁금해요.
Right, it's very similar to the item recommender that weighs popularity very heavily, but also win rate. So we'll try to provide a range of options that no matter which one you pick, if we're recommending it, you'll have a reasonable time in game. And these will automatically update with every patch, just like item recommendations. And for new champions, we can set a starter set of runes, just like we set a starter set of items before we have the data to start populating it automatically.
From the game balance side also, usually champions have 2 to 3 rune pages that are really good for the champion, but if you're even a sophisticated player, it's really hard to know what those rune pages are for every champion, and so we kind of want to make sure that players have a more constrained set of choices, so they can still choose based on the game, but it's easier to make that choice. It's really fun for players to play their champion in multiple different ways, which runes helps with doing. Except when the choice was so difficult to make, it was really hard for players to do that. So we're hoping that this will help players, especially players who only play a few champions, to have like a really interesting experience game to game. Yeah, so I'm also very happy Chris's team is making this feature.
Yeah, we think it'll be especially positive for ARAN players because they frequently have to play a lot of new champions that they're not familiar with, and the Rune Recommender quickly lets them make a decision when they might be swapping champions up until the last second.
완전 동의합니다.
I totally agree.
완전 동의합니다.
Totally agree.
How familiar are you with the jungle changes?
일단 펫이 생기기도 했고, 좀 더 다양한 챔피언들이 정글로 갈 수 있고, 카운터 정글을 어느 정도 방지를 하는 것도 약간 들어가면서 좀 더 안정적으로 이제 정글 유저들이 초반 정글링을 할 수 있게끔 되지 않았나.
Yeah, I think that's roughly accurate. And one of the reasons for making the anti-counter jungle changes was because players being on the receiving end of counter jungling, they can be put in a state where they're extreme failure, so they have no way to get back in the game. Counter jungling for the offensive player, we still wanted to make it a viable strategy and a strong strategy. And then the other set of changes we were making was to move some of the mastery of playing the jungle role around. We wanted to make it so that you still require the same, if not more, amount of skill to master jungle, but we didn't want so much skill to be in clearing camps. As an example, some champions were able to take 2 camps at once, and some champions were not. So like Warwick, for example, could not take 2 camps at once, whereas Zac, for example, could. This made it very challenging for us to balance these champions and make them strong in the highest levels of play. Yeah, so even though in the short term, jungle players might feel like the mastery in their role is decreasing, we're just trying to move the mastery into other elements, like playing with your pet and evolving it and picking the right pet for the game and things like that.
근데 저도 이게 완전 동감이 되는 게, 이 부분은 제가 동감이 됐던 게, 정글 몬스터를 2마리를 한 번에 잡지 못하는 챔피언은 정글러로서 정말 안 좋고 뭔가 템포가 많이 느리기 때문에 외면당하고 이러다 보니까, 그러면 다음에 이 챔피언이 리메이크가 되면 꼭 2마리를 한 번에 처치해야 되는 그런 챔피언으로 돼야 하는, 약간 뭔가 이제 파워 인플레이션이 막 엄청 심해지는 그런 앞으로의 미래가 걱정이 됐었는데, 이게 참 좋은 것 같아요. 차라리 이게 그걸 통제해버리면 아주 좋은 패치인 것 같습니다. 저는 이 부분은.
Yeah, it seems like there are a lot of players who are also interested in these changes because we've seen jungle pick rate go up a lot in the preseason. Players want to try this out. And so, if that sustains, that's a good thing because more players playing jungle means we have to autofill less and we're able to make better matches.
Can I ask what role do you play?
전부 다 합니다.
All positions.
Okay.
But what's your favorite champion?
전부 다 합니다.
No bias. Maybe we can recap some of the changes we made during the season then. We kind of made some changes to durability of champions. What we observed was year over year, adding changes to the game kind of makes champions more specialized in what they can do. So assassins become better at killing you, fighters become better at killing you and surviving, and things like that. We knew we needed to make a change to address players' complaints about damage in the game. But we knew this would have consequences because making all champions more durable kind of slows the game down. And we also knew that it would reset the practice environment for pro players. So we had to launch the changes kind of between the professional play splits. Yeah, and so we put forward a big effort to stabilize the patch within 2 patches. We made 75 changes over patch 12.10 and 12.11, which normally a patch has 10 to 15 changes, so it's a very big effort. And so we knew we needed to make some changes to objectives to incentivize teams to take action. So we buffed the rewards and the durability of Dragon and Rift Herald, so teams were incentivized to fight over them. And we saw some pretty positive effects from that at the Worlds meta. Teams were playing back and forth, very intense fights, and it was quite enjoyable to watch. I'm curious on your thoughts on watching the Worlds meta play out.
제가 또 그 솔로 랭크는 원거리 딜러 AD를 많이 했었는데, 확실히 좀 원딜들이 그래도 어깨를 좀 필 수 있는 그런 메타지 않았나. 아주 좋았습니다. 바로 죽지 않아가지고.
So all of this led up to the World Championship, and then LCK teams performed very well. I think with the higher focus on outplays, it allowed the highly mechanical regions to shine. Compared to previous years where squishy champions would be killed very easily, this allowed kind of the more squishy champions to play limit test, like on the edge, and it was very enjoyable to watch. You could really see the skill differences of the best AD carries compared to North American AD carries. Yeah, we saw a lot of different champions be picked, especially in the AD carry and support roles.
Heimerdinger is a phenomenon now, and he's being played everywhere after Barrel's performance.
That's true. But yeah, we normally find it very difficult to balance the AD carry and support role because for pro play, they're picked very early in the draft. But with the updates to durability, we actually got to see a lot more AD carries and supports be viable. Next.
Yeah, we can talk about rank.
와.
You want to talk about rank a little bit?
이거 굉장히 어려운 주제인데, 이거 다뤄주시는 건가요, 이거?
Yeah, I can talk about it. It was pretty challenging, I agree, but it's something that was brought to our attention earlier this year, being reported, particularly increasing in Korea. And so we looked into it, and we found that that was the case in Korea, but other regions this was happening more frequently. Yeah, so it was a pretty complex problem to dive into, especially because anything we do to the rank system during the season is going to have a large impact on people's ranks that they put a lot of time and effort into achieving. So we have to be careful when we're making changes in the middle of the season and know that what we're going to do is going to be successful. So when we were doing our research and coming up with our options, we considered a few of them. Some were more extreme than others. Examples are giving each player a separate solo and duo MMR, removing duos from solo queue entirely, or increasing our current duo restrictions. So the one we felt confident moving forward with immediately was improving our current duo restrictions so that players who are masters and above don't have to face players who can duo when they themselves aren't able to. So we delivered these changes in 12.10, and then to evaluate their success, we both surveyed LCK teams. We surveyed 6 LCK teams, and they told us that they saw about a 70% reduction in the amount of duo-boosted players they were seeing in their games. And then additionally, we looked at our own internal data that showed that after we implemented the solution, the number of players duo-boosting dropped dramatically. This is a chart that shows that it was increasing in frequency over the year until we implemented our solution and then fixed a bug with it that has now reduced the rates to almost nothing. Now, there are still 2 problems with this. The first is that this doesn't affect players who already duo-boosted and got there. It just stops new ones from doing it. And then the second is that this mostly only helps out the highest ranked players. For the first problem, we're hoping that when we reset the season next January and the new season starts, players won't be able to get to the ranks they were before if they were doing it through this illegitimate method. And then for the second problem, that this our current solution only helps the highest ranked players, we know there's more work to do in this area because players do this through all ranks, and the competitive integrity of the entire ladder is something that we care about greatly. One thing we're investigating that we think will help out every player is looking at account variance. So right now, the new accounts do have an advantage because they can move their MMR more quickly because we're less certain on the new account of what skill it actually is. We want to make more established accounts flexible as well, so that if you show that you've greatly improved in skill, you can also climb and you aren't stuck. Some things in the future we'd like to make a lot easier are being able to learn a new role or a new champion, or be able to play with your friends, which can be hard when you have very different skill levels. And right now, those are a few reasons why people use separate accounts. On the other hand, some people use new accounts to climb the ladder faster, like they're doing now, or to beat up players who are worse than them. And those are things that we don't want to support.
아주 좋은 방향인 것 같습니다.
We can talk just a little bit about maybe the champions in 2022 then?
네,
Yeah.
좋아요.
Yeah. So we released 5 champions in 2022. Some went well, some went a little less well. I think one of the champions that we found quite difficult to balance during the season was Zeri. She has a very unique attack style using her ability, and this was something that we hadn't really done before. And so we knew we were taking a pretty significant risk with making her, but we also want every champion to be unique, and we thought that it was worth taking a risk with this new attack style. However, we also coupled this unique style with high move speed, which allowed high skill players to both use their attacks perfectly and be untouchable. So we think this might have been a critical error in combining these two things, because it made it so that pro players, when mastering Zeri, were basically unassailable, but regular players were not able to use this. We're making some changes next patch, so 12.23, to reduce the amount of move speed that Zeri can get. This will allow her to be more catchable in certain situations. So the exact change that we're making is the move speed can continue ramping infinitely, but if she doesn't keep it up for 1.5 seconds, it'll fall off. This means that if she's keeping up the assault, she can continue going really fast, but if she disengages or she gets crowd control, she'll go back to being more slow. We're hoping that this will open some windows of counterplay, especially for extremely high skill players. This is kind of what I'm talking about in terms of player has a fantasy that is really exciting for them, but there's still counterplay for the opponent. We just released K'Sante. One of the problems with tank champions that made it hard to balance is that a tank champion that deals a lot of damage while being hard to kill is very difficult for opponents to interact with. So for K'Sante, we wanted to try a version of a tank that deals damage And in this case, we decided to split out his damage form and his tanky form. This would allow him to have periods of time where he can deal significant damage, but he didn't need to deal that much damage in his tanky form to be balanced. Since this is the very unique design and something we haven't really tried before, it's unclear what the results will be, but we're really excited to see how it will play out.
그래서 사실 저도 그 상태를 처음 플레이했을 때 궁극기 쓰니까 체력이 사라져가지고 놀랐습니다.
Some of the challenges with visualizing the health drop were challenging. But normally abilities go through 5, 6 different abilities before they land on the final one.
고생하셨겠네요.
Hard work.
Yeah, champion development is very challenging.
두 분 티어가 어떻게 되시나요?
What's your tier? Is your tier?
Right now, I'm
아, 최고 티어, 최고 티어.
So your best tier.
best tier, challenger.
최소.
But in NA, so what is NA challenger in Korea?
의미가 있을까요?
아, 그래도 예.
Your tier?
Oh, for me, I'm currently Diamond. My peak rank was Diamond 1. The designers who are responsible for balance usually have to be pretty highly ranked. Yeah, so most of the designers who work on balance, 3 or 4 of them have been Diamond for multiple seasons, and one was a top 50 challenger. So for some of the more creative designers, we try and make sure that the skill ranks are more spread out. Whereas the balance designers, we try to ensure that they're higher ranked.
자, 여러분들 이렇게 해서 오늘 장인 초대석 외전, 진짜 장인 중에 장인 롤 개발자 두 분과 함께 이렇게 초대석을 해봤는데요. 소감 한 말씀씩만 부탁드릴게요.
I wanted to say thank you to the Korean players. Korean players have always been pushing the boundaries of League of Legends, much more so than other regions, I would say. Korean players are very passionate and hardworking, and it really shows in their domestic results and the level of League of Legends. So very thankful to Korean players. The last thing I would say is Korean players are very inventive, and it makes my job very fun and challenging to discover the next interesting Korean build that comes out and we have to balance around. So the fun never stops.
And then I would just say thank you to all the Korean players for how long you've been enjoying our game and how dedicated you are to it. League of Legends has been around for over 12 years, and it's incredible because not many games get to enjoy that kind of longevity, and you can really see how large it is in the culture in Korea. So I'll just say that we'll keep trying our best to ensure that we keep improving the game and make it a game that'll last for generations as long as people want to play it.
일단 두 분 너무 좋은 말씀 감사하고요. 아, 롤은 앞으로가 더 기대되는 게임이네요. 역시 여러분들 저희 그러면은 오늘은 여기서 컷. I'm going. I'm going.
You're right.
I'm going. Yes. 와우! 스모너가 될 수 있는 방법이 있다고? 멤버십 가입. 지금 가입하세요. 와우!